This episode of The History Guy is brought to you by Storyblocks.
On April 20th, 1897, 4 patents were issued to a Utah-based gunsmith. The inventor, John Moses Browning, had already attained patents for some of the most popular rifle and shotgun designs in the world, as well as the first successful gas-operated automatic weapon to be adopted by any military. Those patents, issued 129 years ago, would revolutionize what was then the nearly new field of what was at the time called the auto-loading pistol. It served as the mechanical basis for virtually every modern semi-automatic pistol in use today. Well known among gun collectors and enthusiasts, the achievements of John M. Browning are much less understood by the general public. I am really excited to talk to you about today's sponsor, Storyblocks. It really is the all-in-one creative toolkit. It has thousands of assets built to help creators like me tell stories through video. And for a limited time, you can get 15% off an annual plan.
I've been using Storyblocks for years, and there's a lot to love about Storyblocks, but you pay one price, either monthly or annually, and you can download and use as many assets, music, sound effects, templates, and this amazing library of stock footage as you want. There are no credits or limited numbers of downloads. Just choose what you want. If you download something and then end up not using it, there's no cost to you. I can tell you as a creator who puts up a lot of content, that makes everything faster, easier, and less stressful.
Let me say that again. This is truly all in one. The amazing video library, music, sound effects, templates, workplace enhancing tools that help you polish your videos, all in one place for one price. I really wouldn't want to make videos without it. It is an essential part of my work process.
The library is really high quality, the sorts of visuals that can elevate your work. High definition, easily searchable, with thousands of choices in both landscape and vertical, and usually available in multiple formats. But more than that, the library is legit. It is entirely 100% human-made, no text-to-AI-generated nonsense, but only works by real filmmakers and artists from around the world. With Storyblocks, you can finally trust what you get. And talk about trust, everything you download from Storyblocks is royalty-free, pre-licensed, and ready for personal, commercial, and monetized projects. With a lot of content out there in the world, you need to worry about licensing rights, but not Storyblocks. It's built to support YouTubers like me, making monetized projects. I have channel ID whitelisted with Storyblocks so that I don't have to worry about those content strikes.
To start telling better stories using tools that I use, head to storyblocks.com/thehistoryguy. They're offering 15% off any annual plan for a limited time. That offer is only available through my link.
Richard C. Roberts made a simple observation in the Utah History Encyclopedia in 1994. John Moses Browning has been called the greatest firearms inventor the world has ever known. It's an easy assertion to support. In 47 years as an inventor, Browning received 128 firearm patents, many of which could be described as having revolutionized weapon designs. Tens of millions of firearms of his design have been manufactured, and many of his designs are still being produced 150 years after they were introduced, and nearly 100 years after his death. The story of John Moses Browning is intimately linked to a unique period in American history, the period of the Mormon pioneers, and to his father, Jonathan Browning. The elder Browning had been born in 1805 in Tennessee, apprenticed as a gunsmith, and opened a shop in Quincy, Illinois. Browning was known for producing a type of repeating rifle that a 1964 biography described as one of the simplest practical repeating rifles ever built, using a sliding breech and commonly called a harmonica gun. The biography explains the rifle brought considerable local fame, plus so many orders that he was never able to fulfill more than half of them. It is a fitting legacy, as his son would go on to revolutionize repeating arms. The elder Browning became acquainted with the Latter-day Saints, who in 1838 had located their main body in the nearby town of Nauvoo, Illinois. After the assassination of church founder Joseph Smith in 1842, Browning relocated near Council Bluff, Iowa, at the head of the Mormon Trail, where he produced guns for the pioneers headed west to Utah. Browning joined those pioneers in 1852, migrating to Ogden, where he opened a gun shop and, being Mormon, married 3 wives and fathered 22 children, among them a son named John Moses, born January 23, 1855. The story of John Moses Browning was intimately tied to the frontier. Ogden in the mid-19th century was still very much in the wilds, Mere survival meant hard work and required hard people. Moreover, remoteness fosters innovation. James King noted in Small Wars Journal in 2021 that at the time of his childhood, Ogden, his lifelong home, was over 1,000 miles from the nearest train stop and 35 from the next nearest town, Salt Lake City. It was an environment where resourcefulness was a necessity, and in this, Browning excelled. The Mormon faith also played a role. Success was measured by contribution to a community and to God, placing unique burden on manufacturers like the Brownings. Guns produced in the Elder Browning shop were marked "Holiness in the Lord, our preservation." His work literally represented his faith. Too, having faced the violence that drove the congregations west, the Mormons of Utah might have had a unique respect for firearms. Blogger William Montgomery notes, mob violence and war after war shaped the society into which John Moses Browning was born. He lived with the ever-present dangers of frontier living. Is it any wonder that he craved weapons that were more reliable, more accurate, and faster? The environment in which John Moses Browning was raised was one particularly conducive to his genius. That showed in one of the most notable anecdotes about Browning growing up. At the age of 10, John, with the assistance of his brother Matt, constructed his own rifle from broken parts in the shop. The weapon was rough but functional, and the boys used it to kill 3 prairie chickens. When John Sr. asked to see the gun, according to a 1963 biography, he said simply, "John Mose, you're going on 11. Can't you make a better gun than that?" The website of the Colorado School of Trades explains what John took from his father's lesson was the idea that improvements mattered. In January 1879, 73-year-old John Browning sold his shop to John Moses for $500. The younger Browning operated the shop with his brother Matt. But the 24-year-old Browning had not yet begun the career for which he would become famous. The Brownings were gunsmiths, but not gun designers. Browning later said, "We ridiculed some of the guns we fixed, and I damned some of them when Pappy wasn't near, but it never occurred to us to make better ones. He was too old, and I was too young." According to biographer Nathan Gorenstein, that changed in the spring of 1879 during a particularly frustrating repair job. Showing the weapon to his father, John Moses said, "I could make a better gun than that myself," to which his father replied, "I know you could, John Mose, and I wish you'd get at it. I'd like to live to see you doing it." He just did. John Moses Browning submitted his application for a patent entitled Improvement in Breech-Loading Firearms on May 19, 1879. His father passed away a month later. The patent was granted in October. Browning had designed the falling block, meaning that the breech dropped down when the lever was operated. This allowed smooth loading and ejection of the cartridge, important in a single-shot firearm. But it also allowed for an exceedingly strong breech, making the mechanism more reliable and able to chamber high calibers than competing designs. This was not some minor improvement. It was revolutionary. Legendary target shooter Ned Roberts called the design the most reliable, strongest, and altogether best single-shot rifle ever produced. Browning's falling block didn't just revolutionize firearms, it changed his life path. The brothers began manufacturing the new design in their shop, but they could only produce 3 guns a day, far too few to meet demand. But by 1883, they caught the attention of a much larger manufacturer. The website of Winchester Repeating Arms explains, 3 years after Oliver Winchester was laid to rest in 1880, company vice president Thomas Bennett took a train to Utah to meet a man who was building an innovative single-shot rifle. Founded in 1866, Winchester was already one of the biggest names in firearms, manufacturing repeating rifles such as the Model 1873, commonly called the gun, that won the West. But the website of arms restorer Turnbull Restoration explains they didn't yet have a high-quality single-shot rifle in their catalog. Bennett saw an opportunity. The exact payment in the agreement between Winchester Repeating Arms and John Moses Browning has never been released, although Turnbull Restoration speculates, let's just say it was enough to make a young inventor's head spin. Winchester secured the right to Browning's patent, and Browning could focus on innovation. The falling block was produced as the Winchester Model 1885. It became wildly popular for sport shooting and hunting, and owing to the strength of the breech, was chambered in more calibers than any other Winchester firearm. Nearly 140,000 were produced in the original production run that ran until 1920. The Winchester website makes a startling comment about the best single-shot rifle ever produced. It's still being manufactured, and is capable of handling even the most powerful modern cartridges. But the partnership also meant something that helped to define Browning's career. The rifle he designed did not bear his name. For all the fame that Browning would achieve in his life, more of his accomplishments are hidden than are well known. His name but rarely appeared on the firearms that he designed. And having designed a legendary single-shot rifle for Winchester, he would then transform the weapon for which they were famous, the lever-action rifle. The website of the Browning Arms Company explains that in the early 1880s, a seemingly unsolvable design problem faced America's gun makers. While repeating rifles like the Winchester Model 1873 were popular, they were limited to pistol-length cartridges, such as the Henry 44. They could not chamber the largest rounds of the day, such as the .45-70 Government, popular for long-range shooting, such as buffalo hunting. The .45-70 Government was designed by the government's Springfield Armory for the Springfield Model 1873, a single-shot trapdoor rifle used by the Army. The linkage designs of the lever-action repeating rifles were simply not robust enough to handle the back thrust of such large calibers. The .45-70 Government originally held 70 grains of black powder versus the 26 to 28 grains of the Henry 44, and the lever actions were not long enough to load and extract the longer cartridges. When Bennett acquired the patent for the falling block single shot, he and Browning also agreed that Browning would work on the problem of a large caliber lever action rifle. Browning's solution was to add vertical locking blocks that flanked the bolt, creating a very strong action for large cartridges. It also featured a bottom-loading magazine, allowing the user to load the rifle without operating the action. It was, the Browning website explains, a total game-changer. Patented in 1884, Browning's new design was sold as the Winchester Model 1886, a model popular for hunting big game, such as bear and bison, and reportedly a personal favorite of Theodore Roosevelt. Trumbull Restoration explains, a lever action built not just for speed, but for raw power. It stood apart from its predecessors in strength, capability, and sheer innovation. Although its role was somewhat niche, roughly 160,000 were produced between 1886 and 1935. Bennett then challenged Browning to produce a lever-action rifle for the small pistol caliber to replace the aging Model 1873. The result, the sleek, handy Winchester Model 1892, became one of the most popular hunting weapons in history. Original production lasted until 1941, and in that time over 1 million were produced in multiple calibers. It was made famous in film, a popular model used in classic John Wayne westerns like Stagecoach and True Grit, as well as the eponymous gun of TV's The Rifleman. Browning followed with the Model 1894 and 1895. The Model 1892 is still produced under license today. In 1887, Browning designed a lever-action shotgun for Winchester. The Model 1887 and more robust 1901 were popular models. Browning Arms describes them as the first successful repeating shotgun. But the lever mechanism was somewhat bulky. In 1890, Browning, himself a champion trap shooter, convinced the lever-minded Bennett to design a pump-action shotgun. Browning's 1890 patent improved the pump action in numerous important ways. Notably, is both loaded and ejected from the bottom of the receiver. The fired shells dropped straight downward, out of the shooter's line of sight. The design also included a slam fire mechanism that allowed the shooter to hold down the trigger and fire as the mechanism was worked. While popular, the Model 1887 was made for the black powder shells of the time. The more robust Model 1897 was made for new, more powerful smokeless shells. The Model 1897 Winchester would be one of the most popular shotguns ever produced, used by the U.S. military in both world wars, where it was popularly referred to as the trench gun, as well as by law enforcement and sports hunters. The original run continued until 1957. More than 1 million were produced. Browning also filed a patent in 1887 for a slide or pump-action .22 caliber rifle, sold as the Winchester Model 1890. A standard rifle used in shooting galleries, it was popularly known as the gallery gun. Browning describes the Model 1890 as the most popular .22 caliber pump-action rifle ever made. Having revolutionized sports shooting, in 1892 Browning partnered with a different manufacturer, Colt's Manufacturing Company. Colt was looking for a design to compete with the Gatling gun. The Model 1895 Colt Browning machine gun, called the potato digger, owing to a swing mechanism that would sometimes graze the ground if the gun was mounted too low, was the first successful gas-operated, air-cooled machine gun. It used a revolutionary operating system, a swinging lever that tapped gas from the barrel. The design was a great improvement over manually cranked weapons such as the Gatling gun and differed from the recoil-operated Maxim gun. The weapon proved itself in the Spanish-American War and the Anglo-Boer War. The new era of smokeless powder also offered an opportunity for a new kind of pistol, originally called self-loading pistols. In 1897, Browning received 4 patents for self-loading pistol designs. While other designers had developed successful semi-automatic pistols before him, Browning's 1897 patents included a revolutionary integration of the breech block and barrel shroud, now universally recognized as the pistol slide. Versus other designs, Browning's design was simpler, easier to manufacture, and more robust. Browning again sought to pair with Colt, bringing a small semi-automatic pistol design to the company in 1897, but Colt executives felt there was no market for the pistol, some speculating that Colt was more interested in protecting its revolver market. Instead, Browning partnered with the struggling Belgian company Fabrique Nationale. The FN Model 1900 was the first production pistol to use Browning's slide design. Popular in Europe and sold to the Belgian military, the successful design is credited with pulling the arms manufacturer from the brink of bankruptcy. The U.S. Army struggled with their revolvers during the 1899 to 1902 Philippine-American War, especially concerned with the limited stopping power of the Colt .38 caliber Model 1892 revolver. The Army began a search for more powerful sidearms, and Colt offered a pistol based on Browning's design. The pistol would eventually be adopted by the U.S. military as the Colt Model 1911. The weapon is legend and served as the standard U.S. military sidearm for 70 years. It is reliable, comfortable, and its 45 ACP ammunition has extraordinary stopping power. Colt arms expert Ralph Wiekert said of the Model 1911, "It did its duty no matter whose hands it was in, whether a U.S. soldier or an FBI agent or a gangster." Colt produced nearly 500,000. Other producers such as Remington Rand, Ithaca Gun Company, Union Switch and Signal, and Springfield Armory took production for the U.S. military to a total of 2.7 million, including production under foreign license. As many as 4.25 million have been produced. Colt still produces the Model 1911 today. Moreover, his barrel slide is the basis of nearly every semi-automatic pistol manufactured today. It is, arguably, the most influential handgun design in history. The M1911 also demonstrated the durability of a short recoil operation system that would be the engineering foundation of several heavy machine guns. The water-cooled M1917 was the primary heavy machine gun used by the U.S. military in the Great War and saw service through the war in Vietnam, with over 120,000 produced. The lighter M1919 30 caliber medium machine gun, which was air-cooled, was used by the U.S. military through the war in Korea and still in service with many militaries today. More than 400,000 have been produced. The M1918 Browning automatic rifle, first intended to be carried and fired from the hip, but most often used as a light machine gun, served from the end of the First World War into the early parts of the Vietnam conflict. More than 350,000 were built. The venerable Browning Heavy M2 50 caliber machine gun, in production since 1921, is still today the primary heavy machine gun used by NATO countries. Some 3 million have been produced. While all but the M2 or Ma Deuce have been replaced in U.S. service, the more modern replacements are all based on the same principles: gas-operated actions, short recoil mechanisms, and a belt-fed system, pioneered by Browning. Browning continued to innovate to the very end. In 1929, Browning was working on a new pistol to serve a French military requirement. Having sold the patent rights to the M1911 to Colt, Browning had to construct an entirely new design. When he died of heart failure in November 1926, he was in his office at the FN factory in Liège, Belgium, working on the new design. FN would complete the design for a semi-automatic 9mm pistol as the Browning High Power. True to form, it would be one of the most influential firearms in history. Generally recognized as the first successful high-capacity 9mm pistol, featuring a double-stack magazine and linkless barrel system, the Browning High Power revolutionized modern handguns, influencing nearly all subsequent 9mm pistols. A standard-issue sidearm for some 90 countries throughout the 20th century, it has been called the sidearm of the world.
And these are just the highlights. Browning's contribution to the development of modern firearms is so vast across so many categories that it's very difficult to try to even begin to chronicle them all. His 128 patents represent quite an achievement for a young man who left school at the age of 7. And to be fair, his brothers, notably Matthew Sandifer Browning, who handled most of the business operations, and Jonathan Edmund Browning, a brilliant gunsmith who produced his prototypes, also played significant roles in the company. And yes, the Brownings made firearms, but understand, as Gorenstein notes, One would be hard-pressed to cite a significant historical event since the mid-19th century that was not started, finished, or changed by a gun. For good or for ill, firearms are a key technology of the modern world. And certainly John M. Browning's name is not forgotten. Amongst gun enthusiasts and historians and collectors, he's widely known as the father of the modern firearm, but outside of those circles, his contributions are relatively unknown. How well known should they be? Well, to put it simply, much more than they are. In his influential 1995 work, The Rifle in America, Philip B. Sharp opined, if his name appeared on all of the inventions of his manufacture, the name John M. Browning would be more well known today than that of Henry Ford. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of The History Guy, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe and share The History Guy with your friends. And if you also believe that history deserves to be remembered, then you can support The History Guy as a member on YouTube, a supporter on our community at Locals, or as a patron on Patreon. You can also check out our great merchandise shop or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo.